Hey everybody, welcome to Game Audio Hour number 30. Can you believe it? We've done 30 of these. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's our weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences, to audio secrets, and I keep looking away because I'm trying to memorize it. Here's where you'll find in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. And I'm going straight to Vince. Hey Vince, how's it going?
Hi. How's it going? I'm having fun here. Let's see, what was I going to say? I am not dead right now because I successfully avoided my house for the last few days with it being fumigated. And once I get back, I'm going to be like, yay, here's my audio setup and all that fun stuff. I'm trying to get back to a life of normalcy and writing music and making cool stuff in general.
So you moved into a house. Did you move out of an apartment into a house?
Yeah, well, I moved I moved out of an apartment, which is one of those, big old, dozens of units things, into an adjoining house to a small residence in this, largely residential area outside of LA. So it's just me in this big studio space that I'm slowly getting up to a respectable living space.
Did you have roommates before and none now?
That is correct. I learned that roommates can be cool, especially roommates who are into game development.
Yeah.
But then it was weird being considered a sort of elder statesman of sorts, and I have to help them out with their game development project, and it's leaving me with less time to think about my own stuff. So now I can go home and just music, games, relax a bit in solitude.
Gotcha. Well, I'm glad you're in your place. And Mike, speaking of his own place, what's up, Mike?
Not too much. Glad to be back. Starting work on a feature film score this week, which is a little off-axis with respect to our show. But since you asked, that's what I'm doing.
That's awesome. I mean, I think our show should encompass everything. I would go pro audio wide as well. I mean, there's no limitations here. It all interrelates.
Isn't everything a game, and thus all sound is game audio?
We should call this the Game Audio 42.
Yeah.
Yeah, bad joke. Fine.
Yeah,
Well,
whatever. So, Alex, at least the one who did laugh at this horrible joke of mine.
That's the answer to life, the universe, and everything, isn't it?
And game audio.
Yeah, and game audio. I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I have been attacked by the barber. I look like I joined the military.
You look better than ever.
Yeah, I'm a mess over here. I normally try to tidy up before the show, but I didn't. I was busy. But it's not about me. Alex, what's going on in Japan?
I'm well, thanks. I've been having a good time synthing it up at Vitae Backroom and doing the usual thing for Winning Blimp. Been extremely busy. May have some exciting things to announce in a few weeks, but at this stage, basically, I'm got the hands on the knobs of the synthesizers, that is, and tweaking away as usual.
Tweaking away the synthesizers, that is.
Yeah, at those knobs.
I'm going to help you with all of that. My wife asked me one time, I was playing in a band in my 20s, and Robert Fripp, who's my favorite guitar player, will famously stay in the shadows. Like, he doesn't have stage lights on him or anything. And I don't really like it either, and I thought if he can do it, I can do it. And she said, "What are you doing back here?" And I said, "I'm just a dirty knob tweaker." Because I'm on my knees, and I'm tweaking delays, and I'm doing stuff. And she said, yeah, you might not want to tell people that.
Very kind of your wife to inform you of that, and says, "Yeah, that's right, Carl. Tell everybody that you're a dirty knob tweaker. Go on."
Yeah. So I told the internet. There it is. So it looks like the live stream was having a moment of weirdness. Thank you again, Google, for all that you do. We should do the thanks Obama with thanks Google. But everybody says it looks okay. So, hey Alex, you want to talk about what the topic is this week?
Well, sure, Kyle. This would be the second time that I've had to lead with the topic, but that's all right. I don't mind. I enjoy it. Anything for the Game Audio Hour.
It's the accent. It makes the topic sound so much better.
Oh, does it? Okay. Right. Well, let's get into it. So a few weeks ago I noticed that the company that makes Symphobia, which is called, Mike, what's the company called?
Project Sam.
What's that?
Project Sam.
That's right, Project Sam. Project Sam had a very nice, attractive offer on their Orchestral Essentials pack for Contact, I believe, which is basically a sound library of orchestral sounds for music producers and, of course, for game audio people like us. And being that up until now, I've been mainly up to my head in synthesizers, I thought, well, this might be a nice opportunity to see if I can get a good deal on an orchestral set, because you can never know when you might want an orchestra. Well, I was actually kind of shocked because it's the first time I'd looked that deeply into what's possible these days with orchestral instruments, and I was most surprised that Symphobia and Orchestral Essentials specialize in these multi-patches where basically the whole orchestra is laid across one keyboard, and you can more or less just play an orchestra with your 10 fingers like you would play a piano. And that was a little bit of a surprise for me, because I'd assumed, that when I'm listening to orchestral soundtracks and games, that I assumed that these are created by people who have experience, knowledge, and possibly education in orchestration and instrumentation, and these basically the traditional techniques of putting together a good sound for an orchestra. And I was kind of surprised to see that, wow, you don't need to know any of that. You can just sort of play a few chords, and you've got strings here, and you've got woodwinds in the middle, and you've got like brass down here, and you play down the bottom, there's some timpani, and you can just have a great time playing an orchestra. And I sort of thought to myself, this is an interesting kind of time that we arrive at the moment with music technology, where a lot of this kind of stuff is so accessible, and I won't say so easy, but it's readily available. If you want to sound like an orchestra, of course you need a little bit of a budget, but it's not difficult. You can just pull up one of these patches and just play an orchestra. So the topic that I was wanting to get your views on today, also people in the chat room, please chime in, is it a good thing that the barrier for entry for our craft in game audio is quite low now? Now, it used to be the case that if you wanted to write orchestral music for a film, you have a piano and you have sheet music and you write it out, and maybe you get the help of an orchestrator, and it's all done in very traditional means. And by the same token, if you wanted to write game music, you needed to understand how to program synthesis engines inside primitive game consoles, and it was very, very technical, and the barrier for entry for the craft was very high. Now it's very low, and even music as well. You can just, if you have Native Instruments Machine or any of the very affordable, great iPad apps or whatever, you can just bang together a dance music tune really quickly. GarageBand comes free with Macs. You can record yourself. You've got loops. You've got orchestral instruments. Just whatever you want, you can just get straight into it. So what do you guys think about the barrier for entry? It's so low now. Surely it must be a good thing, but how do we really feel about that?
Well, it's great. Just from a game perspective, I think about the lowered barrier to entry on all levels. The ease of delivering games in terms of programming skill that's required, in terms of art that's required. So now you can have individuals who are able to do everything that is required in a game. The visuals, the mechanics design, the programming, the sound and music. It's great that things are easier to just get out there, because that means there's more games, which is a good thing. I like having choice there. I'm not sure it's that much of a problem. I actually used to wonder if it was a problem. For me, I do consider myself a trained musician to some degree. I didn't get a music composition degree, but I do consider myself trained in music. What exactly does this have of an effect on me and my own involvement in games? But now there's still a whole lot of other spaces and for the exercising of skill in the creation of music. And oftentimes those skills will change with the evolution of the technology. Okay, we can make a really good sound out of a single VST now, or a single patch even with our VST in GarageBand. It just sounds really good. But that doesn't change the fact that you still need to have a little bit of skill when it comes to crafting a melody or making a really tight harmonic progression or designing a really interesting beat, because drum loops can only go so far, right?
Does it devalue our craft? Jeff and Chase have some interesting points in the chat room right now. Jeff That Noise says more people work for free because they don't see the value in the craft. And Chase responds with, it's becoming oversaturated with people wanting to work for free and ruining the value of the audio departments. It's an interesting idea that when, I hesitate to use the word democratization, but when it's so accessible to everybody, if everybody's doing it, because it's so easy now, does that then lower the value of what we're doing? Or does it actually, conversely, does it actually increase the value because you've got this kind of bedrock of, this floor of saturation of people contributing, and then of course the people who are going to rise above that are going to be the ones who have, I don't know, a special talent with writing melodies or good rhythms or just sort of going beyond just what the easy tools can do. What do you guys think?
Wasn't there just I read a few days ago an article about a guy who was complaining about, I think it was game audio, maybe it was pro audio guys not taking their skills seriously enough, and it was a big diatribe on, how you shouldn't offer to work for free. Hey, I think the more people that are doing anything is going to create more of a competition for price. Like we all want a bunch of shops selling us the same stuff because they'll fight among themselves to get the lowest price just to get your business, and that's certainly good for game development. Yeah, I mean, it gets into dangerous ground here, which I think I want to stay away from, about, pricing structures, and we've talked about that certainly a lot in the past. And you guys talk about it. When I say stay away from it, I mean this Kyle Johnson is staying out of that. But yeah, I mean, it's very interesting how many people have appeared of late, but a lot of guys are watching this show, and that's what this whole thing is about, is to say, here's what we're doing, and so it'll help you with your career and setting up contracts, and here's our pricing schedule, so you can realize that what skills you have aren't super common, and you should be paid for those skills, But that's also very difficult with, like anything else, when you're trying to sell your skills to somebody and there's a lot of people competing for it. So hopefully our show and our website and just us personally are giving you guys some good advice on how to be competitive in this market and yet not and somehow fight off that oversaturation and stuff like that, but make yourself valuable. I mean, so I'm kind of grateful for all the barrier entry has been lowered. People are coming in. And I'm torn because I do see a lot of people working for free, and that hurts all of us. But the truth is, I'm glad to see so many people coming in, because it creates an environment where there's a lot of musical competition, and I think good, friendly competition is good. I love listening to I mean, all you three guys here on this show, I listen to your stuff all the time and go, man, I wish I could do that. And if me and three other guys are the only guys doing game audio, I don't have a lot of people to look at and go, that they would be very inspirational to me. So I'm kind of grateful for all the new blood that's coming in. But I think that we need to make sure that we all value ourselves too.
Mike, what do you think, Mike? Because your background, you've actually had formal education in orchestration. Am I right?
I have, and it's a very interesting issue that's been debated for many years, and has some kind of historical precursors as well. If you think of guys like Danny Elfman and John Ottman, who are film composers primarily, both extremely talented, but they were autodidacts. They taught themselves composition and orchestration, and they grew technically more sophisticated over time. But both of them at the beginning of their respective careers had a kind of naive approach. And I don't mean that in a bad way, I just mean that in a way that was not formally trained. They were just kind of composing from the heart, and they probably were relying on the technology at the time to let them realize their ideas. But we would be very impoverished in film music if neither of them had come onto the scene, and we can thank technology, even early to mid '90s sampler technology, for allowing their voices to be heard. So I think enabling people through technology, be it sample libraries or any of the other things that we take for granted today, allows talent to emerge that might not have otherwise. You can even go back as far as Gershwin. He was writing Rhapsody in Blue. He was commissioned to write this piano concerto, and he said, "I don't know how to orchestrate." And I forget the name of the person who did orchestrate. Thank you. But Gershwin didn't. He relied on someone to help him interpret and implement his music. So maybe that's the early to mid 20th century equivalent of using a sample library, is having an orchestrator back in the day when you didn't have the ability to sit down there and figure out all the transpositions and write out the score. But we're really appreciative for his talent that was allowed to merge with a little bit of help from his friends. So in that respect, I think sample libraries are great, and they're helpful to beginners who might feel intimidated. And it allows people to do simple things very well without having a lot of formal schooling. So I think that's all great. At another level, it allows people who do know what they're doing the ability to do certain things more easily than they would have. So, for example, Synphobia, which is what we were initially talking about in Orchestral Essentials, which is its kind of a knockoff, slimmed-down version, it lets you make quick orchestral sketches or simple orchestral sketches very quickly without getting bogged down in voicing and deciding exactly how you're allotting instruments to different parts of your texture. And I use them very frequently for that purpose. If I just want to kind of bang out an idea and not get too bogged down in the details, those libraries are the first place I go. And then I'll go on a second pass and I'll orchestrate them for real and I'll tweak the details. But these tools are not just for beginners, so I thought that was worth mentioning as well. So those are good things. So if I were to try to think of some negative things, when doing simple things are easy, then sometimes simple things become good enough and we lose sight of what's possible to people with more training or more talent or more technical or more craftsmanship. So if you ever listen to a John Williams score and then contrast it to kind of a media venture score, someone who might have some background in the orchestra, but it might come through the context of working with sample libraries and their voice coming from what's possible in sample libraries, and you compare those to someone who really knows what the orchestra can do, there's a really palpable difference in the sound and the expressiveness and just the variety of sounds you can get in expressiveness. So if you're faced with the choice of drumming up whatever John Williams charges, $2 million, or to bring it back to game audio,
I charge, ironically.
Say it again.
I charge $2 million also. No, I'm kidding.
I should draw from more game music examples, but I'm not sure there's an exact equivalent who leaps to mind. Enon Zur, someone who really knows the orchestra, or you can hire a guy who's really good with sample libraries and can do a few things sort of convincingly to the ears of 2014, and maybe the second guy is 1/3 the cost. There's an obvious temptation, if you don't know what the difference is, to go for the cheaper guy. So the only negative side effect I see is that we can lose sight of what's possible when you've got a live orchestra or someone who really knows orchestral writing or orchestration. So as bad projects can get worse and get away with it because of these tools that lower the barriers to entry. So that's the negative side, in my opinion.
That's really interesting.
Go
ahead, Carl. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say that thank God for that barrier of entry to being lower when it comes to orchestral stuff, because the game industry, this might be a little bit of a crazy thought, and I'll try to be succinct, but the game industry, in my opinion, is suffering, or at least visiting, the edges of a collapse. And it happens, the paradigm shifts, if you'll excuse the phrase. And I feel that we're upon that. Like we had the coin-op collapse, and we had the first-generation console collapse. Now we've got this next-gen kind of collapse. And I feel like the indie Oh, I keep looking down. I'm sorry, I'm not looking at the camera. The indie community is kind of going to save that, right? But the indie community can't afford to have these full orchestral scores. And so we still want orchestral scores in our game, and thank God for sample libraries that will allow that to happen. And even in big budget games, that's still happening, that they're depending more on a sample-based orchestral score than actually giving the funds to go out and record something for real. And we've found ways around it, which we've talked about in previous shows, where you bring in lead instrumentalists and record them on top of your orchestral samples, and it sounds very real. But because now the need is there, whether you believe it's we're on the edge of something weird with the game industry, or it's just that big budgets are looking more for sampled orchestral scores to save money, it's causing these orchestral library makers to come up with better, stronger, more realistic sample libraries. And then while you're there, you might as well figure out some user interface that makes it easier for people to use your library, because a lot of sales going to happen now. If five libraries come out and they all say we sound very real, but they're all very difficult to use, nobody's going to buy them. So if 5 come out and 4 say we're difficult to use, but 1 says I figured out a way where you can write Rachmaninoff pieces by only using 1 finger, that one's going to sell a crap load. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of forcing them to come up with a really good interface that makes it easier for people to use. The industry wants the samples to sound better and better because they want to save money where they can, and I think it's actually pretty good.
I think one very positive aspect that I think with this lower barrier to entry, of course, the flip side is that it can be frustrating. You know, like the same with the low barrier of entry to game design and game development in general. You know, now you get free version of Unity, get a few assets in there, you can release on the App Store. You know, you don't need to have that much money. You don't need to invest a huge amount. You can get started that way if you're very, very lucky, or if you have an excellent idea, you know, or an excellent game concept. You'll wow, something just went really loud.
I know. I'm hearing it too.
Vince, did you just change something? Because something went really loud.
Oh, on my end? I hope not.
No.
Oh, there we go. That's it. That's got it. Okay. Oh, geez, what was I saying? I've forgotten now. I've been derailed. Oh, that's right. Yeah, with game design, you know, it can be frustrating because you could toil away at trying to get that excellent game idea and release and get success for years and years, and then just some guy with his free version of Unity and you know, a couple of Unity Store assets and maybe 1 or 2 contacts in the game industry goes and releases something, and he's an instant hit on the App Store and making millions of dollars. And you've just spent like several years and you've got nothing. And I guess with music, you could sort of say that the flip side is that it could be frustrating that you have somebody who has very easy access to this. Just get, you know, Project Sam's Orchestral Essentials. Happens to be, you know, this melody sounds good, put that in, play it in, and then instantly, you know, everybody's raving about this amazing soundtrack to this indie game that's just come out. However, that said, I think one very, very positive aspect of it is that it's so important now, with so many people contributing to the overall game industry in general. It's so important for us to all to find our voice, and it's so important for us to all to find our sound or our character, so that, you know, when Mike Shapiro writes a piece of music, you can listen to, you know, a few minutes of it and you know instantly that's Mike Shapiro, and it's not Vince or it's not Kyle. You'll know because that's his sound. And I think finding a sound and finding a character in your music is not something that you can just do very, very quickly. That takes a long time, no matter what tools you're using. Mm-hmm. It takes a very long time and a lot of, you know, basically a lot of churning, a lot of writing music in order to find a sort of a sound that people can associate with your work. And all of these tools make that a lot easier. I
agree. I was using... just one thing I'll stick in here, and I'm putting the link in the chat room. I was using recently, I don't know how long ago, you can see the date on the post from the link, but I was using Project Sam's Orchestral Essentials, and I used a single patch. It was like the whole orchestra. And I was just sitting there just trying to hear what it sounded like on my keyboard, which, by the way, I'm a big proponent of playing instruments you have no idea how to play. I am not a piano player. I'm terrible. But because of that, I I use my ear more, and I think obviously being in music, using your ear should be extremely important. But I do know enough around a piano that I know that I'm in a key, and if I put my finger there, it's going to sound really bad. So I don't do it. I go to the next one down because it's probably a good chance that's the one I need to be on. That's literally my thought process. Whoa, that one, it's like hot potato. That one feels warm. I shouldn't put my finger there. Something in my brain says don't do that. So I'm playing this piano thing, and I'm just messing around, and you'll hear it in the link, using one sample library in Ableton, using one patch from the sample library. And when I got done, I was like, this thing's awesome. I really enjoyed it, right? I think it needs work. But the truth is, it led me to a place where I'm going, I think it needs work because it should need work because nothing should be that easy. But I don't know what to do to it. So I was actually going to send it to Mike Shapiro and say, hey, make this sound good. But I just think it's pretty interesting that I can buy this $70, I think it was $70, on Ableton and pull up one patch and start doing things. And I've spent thousands of dollars on orchestral libraries, and this was the first time that I could just put my hands down and actually make something that when I got done I was like, oh my god, I could probably slip that into a game somewhere just as is. And the other thing, this is what made me think of it, is because you were saying your style has got to be, that's really where you stand out. And this definitely has my style. It was able, all the things, like maybe the stars aligned and it was a strange moment, but all those things happened. Like even though I was on a piano and I was messing about, and I mess about a lot on a piano, but I don't know how to play one. And I was like, okay, I'm doing these things, and I had that orchestra, but it's still my essence flowed through my fingers onto that instrument and then into the recording. I was really happy with it. And I wasn't able, I've never, in the, 15 years I've been doing this, I've never been able to do that with any other orchestra library I had. So yay for an easier barrier to entry. It made it sound good. I got my essence out and got to mess about.
I think it's wonderful that, Kyle, you're able to actually listen to a piece of music that you've written and say, yes, that sounds like me. Because I think that's
it's because it's
actually
bad. It's bad. I hear a lot of bad music and I go, hey, that sounds just like me. I sound just like Britney Spears. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I think finding a character and finding a voice, finding a, something that people can identify with. Oh, that's Kyle's work. Being able to recognize that yourself as well. That's a huge achievement, I think, and I guess these tools make reaching that point a lot easier. There's some very interesting contributions in the chat room. Have you guys been reading?
I have been, yeah.
So,
I've been reading so much I didn't hear what you were saying, Alex. What'd you say? I'm teasing. So
let's here's another gem from good old Matt. Matt says, I hear complaints about new composers undercutting the pros and even offering their services for free in order to get exposure. And I agree that giving stuff away for free sets a horrible precedent, but what choice is there? I think the remedy is for the experienced audio people to bring the new composers on as apprentices so they can build a portfolio.
Oh, man, yes. Hans Zimmer does that all the time. Go apply there, too. You'd be surprised. There's a guy who lives up in Santa Barbara. He does it a lot, too. Oh, man, he's one of my favorite. He did, like, the Iron Man soundtracks and stuff. What's his name? Oh, you guys have got to know him. It just left my head. He does a lot of that, too. Absolutely, I agree. But you do have to give away some stuff for free at the beginning, I think. As you're getting your career started, you have to be willing to establish your I'm getting into dangerous ground here, aren't I? Because I do think that we should all charge. But day one, out the gates, nobody's heard of me. How am I going to get noticed? To find some indie game or find something where people don't have a lot of money. Not go to people who have money and say, I'll do it for free. There's so many projects out there that don't have any money and say, hey, I need to get started. You don't have any money. I'm willing to do this because there's a good chance you're going to accept me because if you don't have money, you can't be too picky about my level of skill or my years of experience. So let's just see if we can come together on something. And you still go through the same process, don't you, Mike? Where you, not that you give away free stuff. I just saw that you were getting ready to speak. That you still have to send demos and see if they like the path that you're taking or the vision that you musically see for their game. You still have to do that. So even though you're free, you're still going to pitch, and they might turn you down. Yes.
Well,
Mike?
practical solution is if you're starting out, try not giving away your music for free. And if anyone hires you, based on your non-existent portfolio or whatever demo stuff you bring to the table, you've totally bypassed that problem. chances are someone starting out doesn't have the body of work to convince someone who's capable of paying that they're worth paying. You might occasionally be lucky. You might find some project that's well-funded, and they might take to the samples that you have, the stuff you did in school or the stuff you did in your own, and that's great. But realistically, whether you should give something away for free is a function of supply and demand. And right now there is a crushing supply of composers. And just it's natural economic law. When supply exceeds demand, prices are going to drop because they can. And I think at the beginning of your career, it's not necessarily a bad idea to work for free. It might actually be a very necessary thing to do. The key thing is you should always get something out of a project.
Yeah.
Which is very different than saying work for free, because you may be getting valuable connections, you may be building your portfolio, you may be getting a good resume piece. You know, if you score a free mod that's offered somewhere but get some notice, that will all contribute to your getting more work in the future for not free, which is what everybody likes. So it shouldn't, obviously you don't want to rush to give away your services, but you should calculate if by working without cash up front, you can gain something that will result in cash down the line.
Chase in the chat room, he mentions game jams, and I agree with him that game jams, I think, are a really good place because everyone that's working at a game jam is doing the same thing. They're putting on the table their own skill for 24 hours or a weekend, and there's really no other expectation out of it except for two things. Possibly a working game at the end of it, and two, some more relationships. And as a music composer or sound designer, going to a game jam and being like, oh, hey, you guys are working on games and you're not really expecting anything out of it except a finished game, hopefully, well, count me in. And you throw your own skills down on the table, and that can be a great way to create those relationships. You know, that's really important. You know, it's hard to engage anyone in any sort of transaction before there's some sort of relationship there. Either it's a relationship with the music or sound that you make because they are familiar with your portfolio, because they decided to give you a little bit of time for the portfolio to hit your ears, or in this working relationship in a game jam.
Yeah, that's a good one. I've never done a game jam. They always seem so far away from me. But that is a good idea. I'd like to do one someday. Just have that pressure.
Yeah, it's really fun. You know, everyone just gets really focused, and usually, because of the nature of game jams with the subject being dictated outside, there's often very little ego in it, which is often a problem with other productions. It's like, oh, well, we need to make a game, and there's not one particular person that's invested in a particular version or iteration of a game. Everyone's just working towards this outside concept of the game. And so they'll do it, they make it happen, often with some success since the goals are set a little bit lower for a game jam weekend. It's really fun.
Yeah. You know, it is stressful because you got to get it done so quickly, but the good end of it is that you're not working on it for 4 months.
Yeah.
Really nice. You know, I've run into something recently, and it's I'm trying to think of it. Never mind, it doesn't even relate to this topic, so I'm not going to bring it up and just derail the topic.
Well, do you want to? We had an idea for a second topic today. If you guys want to move on to that.
I wanted to say one more thing. Barrier to entry being lowered is not just in audio either. For instance, I use a program called Hype 2, which is basically a Flash competition for Flash. I can't think of. It's $30. You know, I use Tumult.com, TUMULT.com/hype. Fantastic piece of software. I use Pixelmator instead of Photoshop, another inexpensive solution that's fantastic, and you know, opens all those PSD files. You know, it's all over the place in game development where you can find these cheaper tools. And then you can go too far, in my opinion, and you can get into the free tools, which I don't really mess with. I hear that like the graphics version, that free graphics tool, which I can't think of, is
GIMP.
really good. What's it called?
GIMP.
GIMP. I hear that's good, but I don't use the free stereo mixing tool that's out there. What's that one? I've never had very good luck with that. I can't think of it.
Stereo mixing tool.
I'm sure the chat room will save me. But anyway, so there are some tools that are not good because and then they end up being free. And then there's this middle area of like $30, $40 tools that you don't have to spend thousands of dollars to get the tools. And now look at what the game engines are doing. You know, I have my subscription to UDK. I have my subscription to the Crisis engine, you know, and it's fantastic. And Unity even has a free version, although I think their pricing schedule is going to change because they suddenly became the expensive one. But
yeah, we've talked about it before, haven't we? The like especially free plugins, or also as well as free plugins, the sort of inexpensive around $50 area plugins, just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And so good. You know, the game industry is saying, hey, we need to make games. We need to make it easier for people to make games fast and still be good. The one thing I would like to see less of is side scrollers, though. Can I say that out loud? Is that going to piss anybody off?
Oh, side scrollers. Wait a minute. I like my side scrollers.
100 side scrollers released a week on the App Store or something. My God, people. There are other games other than side scrollers. But yeah, I mean, but the indie community is growing, and that's a great way to get a game out really quickly is to create a side scroller and some really interesting puzzles, you know. And Ian, who's always on the show, he's got one of my favorite side scrollers, so I can't complain. But there's so many. Oh my God. So I want the barrier to entry to be lower. I love that. I think it's cool. I think we all think it's cool in its own way, but you got to be careful. Like anything, in moderation, right? You don't, you know, barrier to entry is really low for audio right now, but don't sell yourself short. You know, get your talents and your chops up and charge a price and see how things turn out. And if it doesn't turn out right away, then go back and practice. There's no harm in that, and try again.
Here.
Composers never complain about the lowered barrier to entry in recording. No one says like, oh man, Pro Tools, it's so cheap, it lets anyone record live instruments. I want to have to go and spend $150 an hour at a studio. This sucks. People don't know anything about recording, and they're making recordings. You know, so to get a real honest perspective on lowered barriers to entry, imagine lowered barriers in a field that you are not financially depending upon, and you'll find your attitude is much more permissive and mellow.
Yeah. I don't want a lower barrier to entry to like colon surgery. I want the high barrier to entry on that.
Yeah,
that's a good point too. I mean, for high-end colon operations, you're probably not going to want someone fresh out of med school, unless is there a colon surgeon aboard this airplane kind of scenario. So high colon projects will always be.
We could have like free-to-play colon surgery, you know.
Right.
Hit the paywall. In order if you want me to sew you up, it's going to cost a little bit extra.
You're laying in the aisle of the airplane with your colon hurting, because that happens all the time, and people are bidding. The lowest bidder wins. That just is frightening, you know.
Sorry, you need more gems to continue. Do you want to buy more?
I like Alex's idea of in-operation purchases.
That's right.
Additional anesthesia?
You just staple your wallet to your butt, right, at a colon surgery, and just say, take the money as you need it. If I hurt, there's another 20. Oh, that hurt. There's a 50. Get it. It's in the side pocket because I crumple it up secretly and stuff it underneath in case I'm ever out of money. All right, enough about the colon surgery barrier to entry. What's item number 2?
What was item number 2, Vince?
Oh, what was item number 2? We were talking a little bit last week about music for video games being immersive versus being memorable. And I think that there's a little bit of a connection there between what we were talking about with the lowered barrier to entry, the developing tech of music software these days. It seems like the tech is so focused now on making things immediately sound good. And it's very easy to just get that sound, render that sound, print that sound to the game. And I wonder if that's part of the reason for there being a lack of memorability in our game soundtracks these days. That it actually goes hand in hand with this development, this evolution of the music technology that we've got.
Yeah, I believe that this was again good old Matt in the chat room. I think Matt asked the question last week. He said, "Is it possible to have both immersion and memorability?" Because I believe that Jack last week was mentioning that one potential reason why game soundtracks these days are so much less memorable is just because in the old days the technology was limited, and basically if you've got one section of the game, you're likely to have one track of music that always plays in that section over and over and over again. Whereas now, the idea of doing that in a game is it's sort of like it's sort of like you're not doing your job. You know, if it's not immersive and it's not seamless, and you actually notice the music doing something, then that's bad. You know, we should be working harder to make it all kind of fit seamlessly into the total experience. But by doing that, you know, have we lost some potential for making melodies memorable, because, you know, the music is now very responsive to what the player is doing, and it's very immersive and very seamless and all of these kind of buzzwords. So yeah, technology makes doing all of that kind of thing easier and least possible these days, whereas it wasn't the case before when you could just have one track. What do you think about that? Is that a potential reason why music has become less memorable?
I mean, it's certainly part of it. Wow, back in the day, a lot of those loops, they were 15 seconds long, actually. Some of those old Commodore 64, Commodore 64 or Nintendo, Sega Master System 8-bit game soundtracks. You're playing a level and it's a 15-second loop. If it's long, it might be 25 or 30 seconds. That's not a long time. You just keep on hearing that thing, and it gets really imprinted on you. And actually, it doesn't really matter all that much if the game is particularly good or bad. Actually, there was an earlier chat comment that was made about how, you know, if you're playing a game, you know, that music, whether it's good or bad, is going to be printed on your brain just by virtue of that repetition that happens there. Nowadays, we just don't have that. We don't accept that structure of the 30-second loop. Even though, in my opinion, I think that there are some games that are out there that would do best with a 30-second loop as its primary music delivery, just because that's the nature of the game. Have you guys seen that, where you'll see some very small game with a particular aesthetic, let's say an aesthetic that harkens back to Game Boy with only a few shades of gray or a pattern, and it's going to have music that is sort of this evolving, very smooth, homogeneous, cool tone that's an interesting tone, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have that bluntness that feels like it should be suggested by the bluntness and low-res, low-fi execution of the graphics or of the mechanics in the game. It seems like we see that a lot, where there's a disconnect between the aesthetics of the visuals, the aesthetics of the mechanics, and the aesthetics of the music and sound.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that meets your description.
Well, I don't know. So I feel like there are, you know, various platformers. It's hard because I'm trying to think back to some of these games that I've just lodged in my mind as, oh, that's not a great game. That's pretty bad, and I'll not play it anymore. But it seems that with as easy as it is to make really awesome sounding, very big sounding music and sound effects, and then you have game developers who are trying to make 8-bit aesthetic games or 16-bit generation aesthetic games, and the music and sound doesn't really quite fit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, I wonder though, because I recently was on a retro game. It's still in development, but it's been put on hold. And graphically, the target was to resemble these old 16-bit games, this particular style, and I can just call it out as the gold box SSI style.
Oh yeah.
That has a very distinct look, and they're like, we want that, but we want the graphics to be updated a little bit, so the pixel art is not technically pixel art; it just looks better. It looks pixel art, but it's not. You know, it looks better. And the question became, what do you want the music to sound like? And everybody said, like the old game. And I'm thinking, you're spending all of this time to make the game look retro but appear newer, but yet for audio alone, you want it to actually really sound old. Why wouldn't you want the audio to sound newer? You know, those things kind of, I think that's what you're saying, Vince, is sometimes those things they don't sync up, they don't jive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that some of those retro experiences that these game creators are making, they can be served with a piece of music or sound design that really does harken back to those good old days of, hey, it's a 15-second loop. Hey, it's not even 2-op FM synth. It's really just simple wave generators and a noise channel, and that's the sound, right? Because that sound is what connects with this particular visual aesthetic, with the aesthetics of the mechanics, even.
Yeah, that's a style of the music being produced, but the sound, for instance, in my example, they wanted chiptunes.
Huh.
The writing is still going to be the same. I love that. You're going to write a 15-second loop and just let it rip because that's what people were used to back then. But why don't we make a modern version of a 15-second loop instead of just relegating everything to chiptunes?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. If there is going to be that update to the visuals, yeah, it feels like some sort of update for the music as well.
Yeah, you would think you'd want that, but the point I'm trying to make is not that that my argument was sound in that meeting. It's that they made a very good point in that we are trying to create a retro game, and that is the nostalgia that we're trying to jump on. We're trying to get people to buy this game because of the nostalgia, and what they're saying is the music, ironically, is the largest part of that nostalgia for them. So even though the graphics can move forward a little bit and still maintain some of that nostalgia, the music can't. It has to be stuck in that time and that kind of design. And I'm glad we brought this up. One more thing, because we talked about this last week with Jack around. He made some great points, but I thought of a counterpoint after the show, and I'm glad it popped into my brain just now. Jack was saying that the songs are memorable because they stuck in your head. I have heard hours of unmemorable songs that looped for 15 minutes. You know what I mean? The reason they stuck in my head is because I liked the melody or I appreciated the instrumentation that they used, not because they just repeated over and over and over. I'm not a sponge for that. I'm a sponge for good music that loops, not bad music that loops. Or ironically, I may remember something that's just so horrible that some of my favorite movies are some of the worst in the world. And in the chat room, we're talking about the Manos, The Hands of Fate, which is awesome, and Plan 9 from yeah, whatever. I love that stuff. That's great stuff. But musically, I don't want to hear bad music, and so if it loops over and over and over, that's very annoying to me. And just because it loops over and over and over doesn't mean it's going to stick in my head. Some of the games that I really like, the music that I remember from back then was music that I liked that looped.
Mm-hmm. Well, what really is good? Familiarity is at the core of it, and if you can make it familiar, it's happened for me where I start out thinking, wow, this music is crap, and then after a while, it grows on you. It literally grows on you. It's this whole other thing, and it becomes a part of your life. Whoa, yeah. Okay, it's now so incredibly intensely familiar that it can't help. But you can't help but have a connection to it. Something often is bad because it revolts you, or it instantiates its disconnect with your own sensibilities. But then after an hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours of gameplay, what was once unfamiliar is now incredibly familiar, and that familiarity is the gateway to considering it not just okay, but even actually outright good.
Yeah.
Do you think that you would have that same experience, Vince, if there wasn't a game accompanying it?
Yeah, because of the game, yeah, it's often insidious is not the right word, but the fact that the music can enter in through these this way that you don't know because you're absorbing it subconsciously or even unconsciously, as the vast majority of your brain power is spent trying to figure out a puzzle or trying to learn the physical virtuosity that's required to get past a particular area in the game. And then before you even know it consciously, yeah, that music is now part of you.
You don't get that same experience when you're hearing music playing over the PA of a supermarket, though, right? Because you're concentrating on your shopping, and this music is just playing in the background. I don't think that if it's a horrible pop song, I don't think that, just the fact that you're concentrating on shopping, thinking, what am I going to get for dinner tonight? I don't think suddenly this pop music is going to sound good, though, right?
It depends. I don't know. When I was last at the supermarket, I'll just go ahead and when I was last at the supermarket, I recognized a piece of music from Japanese fusion band T Square, and it's one of their late albums, and it's not a particularly good one. It's the title track from Welcome to the Rose Garden. I'm like, what the hell? Why is this playing in the supermarket here? Yeah, sometimes it will grab me, but for the most part, I don't even care about it when I'm off doing other things. But there's something about that game context that just heightens the import of it.
I mean, it could be the difference there could simply be because in a supermarket, the music is not is usually not designed to somehow be artistically or aesthetically compatible with the act of shopping. Unlike a game where obviously one of our goals when we're writing music is to have music that fits in with the game and feels like it's part of the game. Yeah. So in our case, that we're aiming to get these two pieces to fit together, the gameplay and the music. But of course, in the shopping experience, it's normally just the local radio station playing pop tunes or something.
I want to take this moment really quickly to bring up back to the last topic, because I wanted to fill this with information that would help people other than what we're talking about, links included. Look up, if you're talking about a barrier to entry that has been lowered and you want a really amazing plugin that I use all the time, it's called Cthulhu. Find that. It's Xfer Records, Jesus, I can't do it. XFER Records Cthulhu. Google that. The thing's amazing. It's like $30 or something. You download it. They've put into the preset all the. I guess Bach, again, not being a guy who studied classical music, Bach did all of these iterations on a theme or something, or some sort of process of doing music. You guys will know better than me. They put those all in the presets, and so you can just like start ham-fisting the keyboard, which I'm quite good at doing. And next thing you know, Bach spits out on the other end. I hate to say it because I've charged good money for that, but yeah, that's it. That's my secret sauce right there. Is a little Xfer and some ham-fisting. Wow. So anyway, I wanted to bring it up because I was going through my links to remind myself before the show ends to the things that I thought were important to bring up. There's that one. Okay, continue with this show topic. I'm sorry.
That's really great. Bach is actually really interesting because Bach, he didn't really consider himself a composer. He was most well known during his lifetime as an organist and an improviser. I think he would probably be one of the first to describe himself as just this collection of knowledge on how to execute on themes and what is considered good Baroque performance principles. And he would just do it. And that's kind of what you do when you're an organist or keyboardist at a church. You have a song, you execute on it with these heuristics that are in your head, and boom, the music comes out. Mm-hmm. What you got there is, if that's what it does, and there's actually there's been a lot of research into how exactly to create Bach over the last few decades, and it's surprisingly doable, and it's awesome that it's available to us because that creates some really cool music. Sometimes it sounds like Bach, and sometimes it doesn't, but that doesn't change the fact that it results in something that is really awesome.
Yeah, and you take this program and you start with just one of those presets. You can then flip it to the side of arpeggiation and just start messing with the notes and create your own thing. And it does a lot of the hard work for you, which is really nice.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone out there who makes big bucks writing 16th century counterpoint is sweating in their boots at this new technology. Competition's coming. Sorry, 17th.
Yeah, certainly in the electronica fields, there's always been the easy way, they're like I remember, I don't know if you guys would remember Propellerhead's Rebirth.
Oh yeah.
One of the very, very early software synthesizer, absolutely incredible technology. And I remember when my friend and I first saw Rebirth working, we'd grown up on all of these, 808, 909, 303 tunes and Hard Floor and, all of those classic stuff. And then here is this software that can do it with, not one but two 303s, and not just an 808, but an 808 and a 909.
Yeah.
And it's all just right there, and you just press the buttons, and all of a sudden you've got techno.
Yeah.
And
thank God.
Every step of the way, there's been something.
Competition's coming.
Oh, what's
Sorry,
that?
17th.
I think
certainly in the electronica fields, there's always
Yeah, we got some
there's always
feedback.
been the easy way. They're like
This is
I
fun.
remember. I don't know if you guys would remember Propellerheads.
Hold on, no, it's not you. I'm
I
gonna.
think it sounds like Michael.
I think it's Mike. I'm gonna mute Mike for a second, see if it goes away. Yeah, it's Mike. Something happened. Mike will have to unmute himself. I don't have control of that. But yeah. So the topic was about immersion versus what was it again?
Memorability.
Memorability. Yeah. So I think it's memorable just because. It's,
You better unmute Mike then. I think Mike's okay now.
Mike
You can
is
unmute him.
he's
You
giving
can
notice.
unmute him now.
I don't have ability to unmute him. It's weird. I'm allowed to mute people, but I'm not allowed to unmute them. So Mike, he's yelling like crazy. If you're on video, you should see Mike just like carrying on. He's faking. He's not really mad, but he's like being extremely animated, which is very much like Mike Shapiro. So I think it comes right down to it. This is the point I wanted to make.
Are you going to unmute him, or are you going to leave him there for old Mike?
I can't unmute him. He has
Oh,
to
you
unmute
can't?
himself.
Unmute yourself, Mike. Oh, he's walking out now. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, Carl.
It's weird. I have the control to mute. I don't have the control to unmute. Does he even know that? He's
I think
typing
he's
something
writing on a
now.
piece of paper, yeah. Anyway, go ahead. What were you
So
saying?
I was just saying that you have to write good music. That's what makes it memorable.
Oh man.
Mike just wrote help. For those who aren't watching the show, Mike's video, he held up a piece of paper that just said help. That's all. Mike is wondering how to unmute himself. Mike, what you do is click on your face on the window in front of you, and you should see a microphone with a slash through it that is red. You should make it white by clicking on it.
There he is.
Yes.
Welcome back.
No, that's great. I don't
Mike.
know what happened. I was hearing double voices for a while.
That happens at night when the nightmares come.
Okay, so wrap us up, Kyle.
All right, fine. With 1 minute left, that was fun. Okay, so yeah. So what did we agree on? That why was music memorable? Have we agreed? Why is music memorable?
Good
It's
music.
memorable because it's connected to a game.
Yeah, visual. You got
It's a
two
little
inputs to remember it. That is very good too. Yeah, that makes a big difference. I can still hear music when smells happen. Like when I was growing up, I'll think about something that, like if I smell a pool, I can't help but hear the radio at the pool I swam at when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
I was going to say one other reason that music is memorable is because we used to be 15, and the way we relate to music we hear when we're much younger is different how we'd relate to the same music today. There is just kind of a flashbulb effect when we're younger that we connect to a certain style of music and it lingers with us. So we should always factor that in when complaining that music today ain't what it used to be when we were kids and the best game music ever was written that has not yet subsequently been matched, because everyone who's 15 now feels the exact same way.
So Mike proposes the geezer problem. Get off my lawn. Yeah. Nothing is as cool as it was when I was a kid. You kids and your rock and roll.
Oh, man.
And it's a very valid point, actually, isn't it? I do that all the time. Like, I'll see people reacting. Or I was at Trader Joe's today, and I thought, some of the biggest jerks I know in the world are shopping at Trader Joe's because nobody says good morning. They don't get out of your way. They're not polite. And then my wife goes, "You're just old." All right. Good melody. Attach it to some sort of other input, like a visual input, and of course, take into consideration that the things that you enjoyed when you were younger really put a massive imprint on you, and nothing will seem to compare.
Yeah. The connection between the music and the game, it's really important how that connection happens these days. And when we think about those old games from the 80s and 90s, we are often thinking about how they sucked you in. Part of it being because we were teenagers or preteens and we had all the time in the world during our summer vacation, so we could just sit down in front of the TV for hours at a time. And that's the connection there. But now increasingly, whether we're 15 years old or 30 years old or 50 years old, with the way that game consoles and computers and websites are these days, that's not the way that the timing works now. But so we still have to think about how exactly that connection is going to work with the new structure of gameplay.
Do you think game audio is a young man's game? We're too old to produce something memorable?
I don't think so. Have you seen all those old farts that worked on the soundtrack for Mario Kart 8? Man, that's a great soundtrack.
Well done.
I'll also point out that I think Jeremy Soule is probably around our age, and Inan Zur is a little bit older, and have written and continue to write amazing scores. So I think with age can come experience, and in certain genres, age is an asset. But I may be just saying.
No, I agree with you. Those are great examples. You know what I want to talk about one day, as we're wrapping up, is the style of music that is natural to you, how to get that used in a game. Because I've found that in my career, what I do naturally is not popular in video games. I don't get a huge amount of contracts, as opposed to like other types of music, like maybe some happy Disney classical stuff. It's like I can't do that, and I see that all over, and my brain goes, that person or persons who can produce that must get a lot of contracts. But I know that we preach to people to be true to who you are as a musician, because that's really your biggest strength, is that you'll be able to reproduce this regularly and do it really well. But if you have something that's not super popular in the genre that you're, or in the business that you're in of writing music for games, it could be kind of dangerous, isn't it? I think that would be a fun topic for us to kind of list the things that we do and how we get them used in games.
That might be a good one for next week.
Maybe. Mike's good at it all. So is Vince. So is Alex. So I'll complain.
No. I am not good at it all. Definitely
Whatever.
not.
I know the modesty. All right, guys, you ready to sign off?
Whew. Yeah, I guess so.
I'm going to sign off with one more link to theproaudiofiles.com. It's my new favorite website. If you get a chance, check it out. I'll put it in the show notes. All kinds of tips on mixing and how to use like spring reverbs and videos on how to record with distortion on a guitar. I mean, they go all over the place. I love this site. I keep going out there first thing in the morning, so I just wanted to kind of give a shout out to that website. It's theproaudiofiles.com. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks everybody in the chat room. We had a lot of good conversation in there as usual with our excellent regulars, good old Chase and Matt, and we had Jeff That Noise today, and
so many.
Cardinal was there, and Matt Jack.
I think my stepmother's here. I just saw that Blue Ridge Mountains is here. She might be watching me. That's kind of creepy. She'll call me afterwards and say, "You should have shaved." No, she would never do that. But anyway, yeah, Matt Jack's a good friend of mine. I was happy to see him in there. So, and I had to scroll. I love it when the chat room requires me to scroll through the name list. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, chatties, for joining in. And thanks, panelists and my awesome friends for coming and being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Rock on.
Bye.